Welcome to the Starlight Pet Talk podcast, where we'll talk about and explore ways to help pet parents and future pet parents learn everything they need to know to have a happy and healthy relationship with their pet. So sit up and stay for Starlight Pet Talk, rescue, adoption, and pet parenting done right.
Welcome to Starlight Pet Talk. I'm your host, Amy Castro. And one of the struggles many people have, especially when it comes to coming into the summer travel season, is what do I do with my pets? Traditionally, that question has sent many of us scrambling to find kennels or pet sitters that we trust, and then worrying the whole time that we're gone about what's happening to our pets. But what if we could take our pets with us on vacations or visits to family? So my guest today is Amy Burkert. And in 2009, Amy launched Go Pet Friendly, which is a website that inspires people to do more with their pets and provides resources they need to make that happen. With more than 65,000 pet-friendly listings across the US and Canada, Go Pet Friendly makes it easy to find pet-friendly places to stay and things to do once you get there. After launching Go Pet Friendly, Amy and her husband Rod traveled full-time in their Winnebago, kind of a dream of mine, with their dogs for more than 12 years. So she really knows what to do when it comes to traveling with pets. With 200,000 miles behind her, Amy shares pet-friendly destination advice and practical pet travel tips on the Go Pet Friendly blog. So Amy, thank you so much for being here with us today to share your information about traveling with our pets.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So obviously you spent 12 years living in a Winnebago with your pets, but what made you kind of start traveling with your dogs as opposed to doing what we all kind of traditionally have done, which is to leave them behind?
For us, we had dogs that were not easy to leave behind. So we had dogs with medical conditions, some behavioral issues. One of our dogs was afraid of strangers, so it was very difficult to find comfortable boarding situations for him. And we just decided that then like you said in the intro, like when we were gone, if we did find someplace that we could board him and we felt comfortable with it, even then we were still worried the whole time that we were gone about what might be happening or how he would be adjusting to the situation. And so we just decided that it really was more stressful going on vacation without the dogs than if we took them with us. So yeah, that's why we decided to start traveling with them. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose to set up a vacation and then be stressed out the whole time that you're gone.
Yeah, it really didn't make any sense. So it worked out a lot better to just take them with us. And what we found over time was that we really had a lot more fun with them as well. We did things that we probably wouldn't have done if we didn't have the dogs with us. Like we were more active on our trips. We got to see more things because where we might have just decided to hang by the pool for the day if it had been just Rod and I, that wasn't going to work with the dog. So we needed to find hiking trails or find scenic train rides or rent a canoe and go paddle around a lake for an afternoon because those were the kinds of things that the dogs enjoyed doing and that we were all going to be happier for at the end of the vacation, right? We got to see a lot more and do a lot more because we had them with us.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about it that way, and maybe I'm just not as active a person, but I guess the few times that I've traveled with our dogs, it was more a matter of worrying about leaving them in the RV. And we're not going to talk obviously only about RV travel, but that's kind of been my lone experience of traveling with pets has been with the RV. And a lot of times it was almost out of necessity. Like we're going to visit family and we're going to take the RV anyway. So let's bring the pets, but the dogs kind of got left behind. So I hadn't really thought about, thinking about it from the standpoint of doing more things versus fewer things when it comes to bringing our pets along. So that kind of brings up a good question. So if a person was going to travel with their pets, is it choosing the destination and then figuring out whether the pets are going to fit with the destination? Or do you find people are looking more and more to choose a pet-friendly destination first and then plan their trip around that?
Yeah, that's really what we find. I mean, sometimes people have a general idea in mind, like they're interested in going to the beach. So they're going to look for a pet-friendly beach, or they're interested in seeing some of the national parks, for example. They want to take a road trip and hit a few national parks. Well, there are some national parks that are a lot more pet-friendly than others. So if you're making that kind of a decision, they kind of have like an idea of what they want, but you can tailor it in a way that makes it more enjoyable with your pets if you choose destinations that are pet friendly. That's not to say that there's not pet friendly things to do any place you'd want to go. If you do, you just have to do a little bit more research, obviously, but you can always find something pet friendly to do. But yeah, I mean, it is easier. Like, for example, let's take Yellowstone, for example, right? None of the trails at Yellowstone are pet friendly. It's hugely popular. Rod and I spent a lot of time around Yellowstone looking at the areas outside of the national park so that we could identify, okay, maybe you did one day in the park and then you did the next day outside of the park. And here are all the pet-friendly things to do on the west side of Yellowstone. And then you did the next day in Yellowstone, and maybe then you did the next day, the following day, on the north side of Yellowstone. And so here's all of the pet-friendly things that you can find to do on that day. No matter where you want to go, you can always find a balance of things to do, but I think it can be easier if you sort of start with a destination that has more pet-friendly options available.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Do you feel like there are certain dogs that are more suited to this? Like you said, you've had concerns about leaving your dogs behind because, medical issues or anxiety issues, or the one that wasn't good with strangers or new people. Is that something that a person should take into consideration when they're deciding whether to bring their pet with them when they travel?
Absolutely. I think it's important always to think about your pet's limitations and abilities and what they're comfortable with, what they're most comfortable with. Generally, our pets are most comfortable being with us. Regardless of the situation, they're generally most comfortable being with us. There are some pets who would prefer not to travel, even if it would mean that they're not going to be with us. Like there's a small handful of pets that would rather just stay home, even if you're not going to be there. If you've decided, okay, my pet would rather be with me than not, so we're going to take him on vacation, then you can start to think through, okay, is New York City a good idea for my pet?
That's exactly what I was thinking about cities, yeah.
In the Rocky Mountains, a better idea for my pet based on his abilities and limitations, right? And what's he going to enjoy more? But the thing is, too, I want to say that our dogs that we started traveling with, we traveled the first 10 years with Ty and Buster of our adventure. So they were not easy dogs. Neither one of them. Buster was least reactive. Ty was afraid of strangers. They were not easy dogs to travel with. And you don't have to have a perfectly behaved dog to be able to travel with them. And I think that it's important to understand that traveling itself is a learning experience for you both. It's an opportunity to build your dog's confidence. It's an opportunity to extend their training. It's an opportunity to bond and work on overcoming some of the challenges that they have. Over the years, Buster got much, much better with his leash reactivity. If I had waited to start traveling with Buster until he was completely not leash reactive, we never would have gone anywhere.
That's a good point.
But we thought ahead, we planned ahead, we managed the situations as best we could. We did our very best. I'm not going to say we were always successful, but we did the very best that we could. And over time, both dogs improved with their behavioral challenges. So I just don't want people to think that they have to have the perfectly behaved dog before they go anywhere. There's always a way to manage a situation to make it so that your dog can be successful. So I just answered an email this morning from a woman who's having trouble with her dog barking when they go out to eat. And I'm like, okay, so start with a picnic. Start with picnics. Find a picnic table in a park, something, open space where if your dog barks, it's not going to be irritating. Everybody who's paying to sit on this patio at this restaurant, right? Your nerves are calmer. So go to a park, make it as much like the restaurant experience as possible, and start training there. Take what your dog can do and work with that and build on it over time so that you can all be happy and successful.
Yeah, that's excellent advice, because I think people, they make a decision and they kind of jump into the pot of boiling water, so to speak, and then it turns out poorly, and then they say, I'm never going to do that again. And I know that's something I've struggled with my bulldog, is that she's very excitable, and she's been like that since I got her. And it takes her in any kind of a new situation or with new people, it just takes her seemingly forever, to just calm down and not be. And of course, a bulldog, it's like the noise and the slobber and the chaos, and it kind of makes you hesitant to bring her out. But at the same time, you're absolutely right, is that if I don't ever bring her out, she's never going to get over that. But so bringing her out in stages, taking baby steps is probably the way to go, as opposed to, launching right into a fine dining patio experience in Paris or something like that would not be a good choice. So that's very good advice.
Like I said, you kind of grab takeout food or you pack a picnic for the day. And then once they're good doing that, then you move up to a coffee shop in off hours, right? It's the next small step. Now you're in a more formal setting, not in a park, a more formal setting, but it's also easy. You've already paid at the counter. If the dog starts misbehaving, it's real easy to stand up and walk away. You're not waiting for your food to arrive like you would be at a sit-down restaurant, right? So there are different steps that you can take. And I think that that's the important thing for people to understand is that taking your pet on a trip is going to require some accommodations on your part. There's going to be some sacrifices that you're going to make. You're not going to the Guggenheim. You're not, unless you're going to get a pet sitter for the day, there are going to be some sacrifices that you're going to make. But the benefit of taking your pet with you, there is nothing like seeing the Grand Canyon with your pet. The memories that you make, our dogs and pets are with us for such a short period of time. We have them for such a short period of time. But the memories that you make together last forever. So taking your dog and experiencing the Grand Canyon together, that changes the whole experience for me. It's so rewarding to do those things. To take them on a canoe trip down the Buffalo National River. To do those things together makes the experience so much richer that the things that we ended up sacrificing, and I'm using air quotes here, the things that we ended up sacrificing didn't really seem to matter. Those were things that were kind of irrelevant when compared to the things that we got to do and see with our dogs while they were with us.
Right. That's an excellent point. I'm picturing my trip to the Grand Canyon, and it would be a very enriched experience to be able to have your pets with you. So let's get practical for just a second. So I know you can't give us necessarily an exhaustive list, and I would bet there's probably a blog post or some resources on your website related to this, but what would be some basics that people would need to keep in mind when it comes to packing for a trip? And I know it might be different depending upon where you're going to stay and whether you're traveling in an RV. Obviously, that's a very different situation than just traveling with a car. But what would be some advice there of things to pack for the pet or for you as your pet's handler, for lack of a better term?
Right. Well, it's important always to pack things that help your pet be comfortable, right? You want them to be comfortable. You want them to be safe. So the first thing is make sure that they're buckled up in the vehicle. RV, car, dog, cat, hamster, bunny, whatever you're traveling with, and in whatever vehicle you're traveling, it's important to have your pet secured, either in a crash-tested carrier or in a safety harness that's been crash-tested. Mm-hmm. That's number one, because the most important thing when you're traveling with your pet is to make sure that you come home together safely. Right. So the second thing is I always recommend that people pack, that you scan your pet's most important medical information to a USB drive and you throw that in their travel gear. Because if you would have an illness or an injury while you're out traveling and you would need to see an emergency veterinarian, they're going to need to know when their vaccinations were and what's the name of their doctor, so that you kind of have all of that information at your fingertips, because in an emergency situation, it's kind of hard to recall all of that. So it's easy if you can just hand somebody a USB drive and say, everything that I think that you'll need is on here, and I'm going to sit with my pet while we're in the waiting area, and here's all the information that I think you should need.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then the other things are just, you want to take something that keeps them comfy. So if they sleep on a blanket at home, then a blanket for them there. If your pet's used to being on furniture, then bring something that you can cover the furniture with. Just try to be a respectful guest, right? Whether you're staying in a hotel or an Airbnb or whatever it is, try to be a respectful guest and not leave behind a bunch of fur, because we want people to keep welcoming pets into their facilities, into their lodging. So being respectful that way really helps. And then just kind of things to keep them entertained, keep them safe. An extra leash, always important, right? Grab an extra leash. If your pet's used to being off leash a lot, maybe like if you've got a backyard where they hang out all the time. I don't happen to have that, but we lived in the RV for so long. Our dog thought that being on leash was like the normal way you went outside. So, but if your dog isn't used to that, then grabbing a long line, right? Grabbing like a 20-foot leash or a 25-foot, even just a piece of rope with a clip on the end, so that they can have some room to explore, but not be off leash unless they're in an enclosed area. Especially when you're traveling, it's really easy for a dog to get spooked by something that they don't normally see, or be attracted by something that they don't normally see. Wildlife deer, squirrels, whatever it could be. And when you're traveling, it's really important that they don't get lost, right? Because them finding their way home is a lot less likely. So always keeping a long leash in the car, something like that, is handy because you can let them explore and give them some freedom, but still have the safety of being able to recover them in case you would need to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's so important about securing them in the car too. Even just traveling locally when I'm transporting animals for the animal rescue, it's like everybody's always secured in the car, obviously for their safety, but also all it takes is a dog, whatever the animal is, opening the car door, opening the hatch in the back, and out they hop and out they're gone. So it's always scary to me when I see people that have their animals just kind of free roaming inside the vehicle without any kind of security like that.
Agreed. It terrifies me as well.
Yeah. No, and I think the idea of having it, because at first I was thinking, oh, you could have all those documents on your phone, but having it on that jump drive or that USB drive is an awesome idea to just be able to hand that over to that emergency vet. Because of course, inevitably, if you need a vet, it's going to be after hours when your vet is closed, or you can't get a hold of them. They're not answering the phone. They're on lunch break. So carrying that with you is a great idea.
It's going to be a weekend. Dogs never need to go to the emergency vet during regular office hours. They only ever need to go
it's always
after
Friday
hours
evening.
and on the weekend. Yeah,
Exactly. So on that note of your pet's health while you're traveling, what are some of the travel issues? So you mentioned the lady that had asked you for help regarding the pet barking. What about illness issues or behavior issues when it comes to traveling? Like the first thing that comes to mind for me is the dogs that get car sick. I know we've had some here at the rescue that you're not even 5 minutes down the road and they've already thrown up in the car. That might deter somebody a little bit.
Absolutely. And that's definitely one of the things to think about when you're deciding whether to take your pet along. So if you have a pet that does get car sick, the first thing I would do is talk to the vet. We have a blog post about motion sickness, some ways that you can help prevent motion sickness. Covering the windows can help. Putting them inside a carrier, if they're small enough, that can really help with keeping them from seeing so much of the motion that might be causing the motion sickness. But for bigger animals, like if you're traveling with a dog and you would have to have a great big crate in the car and then there's no room for your luggage or whatever, and so that's really not an option. Then I would talk to the vet because there are some medications that will help with motion sickness. But it's something to consider seriously before you would plan a long road trip with your pet, right? Is if they do get motion sickness, is a staycation a better idea? Do you want to maybe reduce the distance that you're traveling? Maybe you go a couple of hours from home and you stay there for a week as your vacation option rather than trying to do a cross-country road trip for your vacation option, right? That's part of what I mean when I say considering your dog's what their limitations are. Motion sickness is something that Rod and I dealt with a dog that we had years and years ago. And it's no fun for anybody.
Yeah.
When your dog is motion sick, when your pet's motion sick in the car. And cats can also have issues with being in the car, right? Not necessarily that they get sick, but they just don't want to be in there and they cry the whole time. So something that we highly recommend is when you're starting to think about traveling with a dog or a cat, you start with very short trips, right? Mm-hmm. You just pop them in the car and you go someplace fun. Please don't have the vet be the only place that the pet ever goes.
I was just thinking about that.
Before you get in the car for a vacation. Like if that's where they think that they're going every time, that's not the response that you're going to want. Nobody wants that. So, so if you start by going places that are fun, plan a play date. If your dog likes the dog park, head to the dog park. Even just pop them in the car, and if there's a place in your town where they have like a dog-friendly little ice cream treat at the ice cream stand, pop them in the car and go do that a few times so that first of all, you can understand how they're feeling in the car physically, but also that they start to build up a positive association with being in the car. So that way you can, work on then longer trips and longer trips and longer trips. For a lot of dogs, it's really obvious the first time you take them out and they're excited and they're happy and, being in the car is not going to be a problem. But for those where it is more of a challenge, then we just recommend, again, taking baby steps, just trying to build up their confidence, build up their security, build positive associations, and that this is going to be a fun thing. And that usually is the best solution.
Yeah, that's such a great idea because I think you're so right, is that too many times Our pets never get into the car except when they're going to the vet. So it's always a negative association. And, with cats, I think too, even if there's not probably too many places except, if you have maybe your cat on leash, which I do have friends that have their cats trained to be on leash to go. And there are people that travel with cats on a leash as well. But just getting them used to being in the vehicle, and at least even if it's not having a fun experience, but it's at least not having a negative experience. So maybe we just drive around the block a couple of times and then bring them back in and then do something fun. So it's not associated always with going to the vet. That's a good point.
Well, I totally agree. And
yeah.
people are doing more and more with their cats. Like people are paddleboarding, people are canoeing, people are hiking, people are camping, so cats are getting out there and doing things too that we really didn't see cats doing even like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly. So, but also then even taking it a step back and saying, allow your dog or cat, if they're going to be in a carrier or they're going to be in a harness or they're going to be on a leash, allow them to get used to that at home. Set the carrier up in a place where they're going to walk by it 30 or 40 times a day. Throw a treat in it every once in a while. Start building that positive association with the carrier. Then start building the positive association with the carrier in the car. Then, and it's kind of like you have to take it back to the very, very basic thinking, and then build on it one step at a time based on how comfortable your pet is at any situation along the way.
That's another great point. I know that we, at least around here, we've done a good job with that with the crate. We do crate our dogs and they see those as their houses. So there's no struggle to get them in the crate. We just yell houses and everybody goes and boop, 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 and they get in wherever they're supposed to go because they do that's where their bed is. Probably 80% of the time that's where they're getting fed. But that's a good point with the cats. When your cat scatters as soon as they see that carrier come out of the dusty closet or out of the attic or whatever it is, maybe we need to leave those things out, leave them out. Like you said, feed them in there, put a treat in there, let them associate that. Then there wouldn't be so much anxiety of being chased around the house and rounded up, stuffed in a plastic box, thrown in a moving vehicle. And no wonder you're puking and pooping everywhere. And you haven't even gotten down the road. So you're brilliant. I'm going to start working on that a little bit more. That's a good point.
I mean, think about that from your own perspective. Like if
I know,
right? Like that's no way to start a fun vacation.
Exactly.
That is not going to turn out well. When that's how it starts, there's no happy ending to that.
That's right. That's a good point. So what about travel issues along the way? One of the first things I thought about for somebody that's traveling in the car versus in an RV is what happens when you have to stop? What happens if obviously if I'm traveling with another person, then we can kind of take turns running into the Buc-ee's restroom, which is it's the place where you want to stop if you're traveling in Texas. And I know they're expanding across the country, but obviously you can't bring your pet into the convenience store or into the Buc-ee's or into the place that you're stopping. If you don't have somebody else with you, how do you manage that?
Well, one of the things that we do is we have a listing of places where you can bring your pet inside. So you might want to check for a PetSmart or a Petco in the neighborhood, right? You might want to check for a place that allows pets inside where you could potentially use a restroom, right? And stop separately because it also gives your pet a chance to get out of the vehicle and move around a little bit, which is good for them too. And if you're talking about like using rest areas or something like that, then naturally, you're only going to be in the restroom for just a couple of minutes. So leaving them in the vehicle while you're doing that is probably okay. And then letting them out and letting them relieve themselves and stretch and walk around a little bit and explore a little bit is handy as well. But also making sure that you've got them buckled up before you open the car doors, because at rest areas is one of the most common places where pets go missing when they're traveling.
Yeah, and people think their pet's not going to hop out, and you'd be shocked sometimes how quickly it happens, for sure. I've actually caught
they move,
I've actually caught one midair leaping over my shoulder at one point trying to get the hatch up, and it's like, luckily he was secured, but still, if he hadn't been, it would have been a nightmare. And I want to make a point about the stopping at those pet friendly places like a PetSmart or a Petco or Pet Supplies Plus that allow you to go in, and you can agree or disagree. Tell me what you think about this, Amy. But I feel like if I'm going to go in and use somebody's restroom, I need to make a purchase. So don't be that person that goes in, uses somebody's restroom, lets your dog lift their leg on the display, and then walks out without. I mean, buy something while you're in there. Do you agree, or what do you
Absolutely.
think?
Absolutely
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's always something when you have a pet, there's always something that you need, even if you don't know you need it until you get in there, they will find
That's
something
right.
that they need, So, yeah, absolutely. That's something that you would want to do. I mean, to me, that's just kind of being a good citizen, right? That you would reciprocate. They're allowing you to use their facilities and you need to reciprocate. So yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
Okay, great. All right, so let's talk accommodations because I know there's a tremendous amount of information on your website related to accommodations. But I know that when we used to travel with our Doberman Pinscher, even though we were traveling in an RV, we were very limited as to where we could go because of breed restrictions. What's the best way to go about, I guess, planning for that? Is all of that information readily available on your website or on the websites of the places that we would travel, or is that sometimes hard to find?
On our website, we try to make it as easy as possible. So we
Great.
have about 25,000 listings for hotels and about 1,200 listings for rental properties. We've got about 4,000 listings for campgrounds on the website, and part of that listing detail is a pet policy. So it says
Okay.
if there's a weight restriction or a breed restriction or a limit on the number of pets or a limit on the size of the pets that are allowed to be there. It also talks about any additional fees that are charged regarding pets. So we've tried to make that information as easily accessible as possible. And we traveled with a German Shepherd, so we were kind of in the same situation as you were with your Doberman Pinscher. Not as bad as the folks who are trying to travel with pits, right? They're seeing more discrimination, at least at this point right now, than other breed owners are. So for those people, I really recommend focusing on places that are not privately owned. If you're getting frustrated in your search for accommodations, I recommend looking at campgrounds, for example, that are run by the state or the federal government. So state parks, national parks, Army Corps of Engineer campgrounds, those kinds of places, because they don't tend to have the same sorts of restrictions that a private campground will have, for example.
Right.
The other thing I would say is I would look to a hotel chain like Kimpton. So Kimpton doesn't have any breed restrictions. In their hotel chain, they don't restrict by breed at all. And that last thing for people who are traveling with restricted breeds is that we do have some information on the website about that, how to travel with a restricted breed. One of our bloggers has 2 pitties and travels with them extensively. So she has some really good practical information about how to approach that and questions to ask. And the thing I would say is I would avoid certain places. Miami has a breed restriction in the, that area. Denver has had a breed restriction for years and has lessened it to some degree. And there's a blog post about it, about what is required now if you're going to take a pit to Denver. But my feeling is there are so many great places to go. You don't need to go to a place where your breed really isn't welcome. My recommendation is find some place where they're happy to have you there. All of you, your whole family, including whatever breed of pet you have, because there's plenty of places to choose from. So you don't have to be limited by something like that.
Right. You had mentioned that your dog doesn't have to be perfect. At the same time, with my Doberman, just as an example, he was very well behaved and very well trained. When we took him into, let's say, into a public place or walking in a public park, he was a good representative of his breed. And I think that, for people that have breeds that already maybe have a mark against them, the better behaved pet you have, the better off you're going to be.
I totally agree. I think that being ambassadors for your breed and ambassadors for traveling pets in general, right, is always a good idea. We always encourage people, be sure that you pick up after your pets. Be sure that you're following the rules. Keep them on leash where they're meant to be on leash. Don't assume that those rules don't apply to you. Even if your dog is super, super well behaved, and doesn't need to be on a leash, just follow the rules. Just be a good
Right.
ambassador. I think it always plays better that way. So I definitely agree. And I think that's another place where you can really start to think about, okay, how do I set my pet up to be as successful as possible, right? Let's not put them in a situation, maybe a farmer's market that's packed with people and other dogs. A farmer's market was never the best place to take Buster. He was leash reactive. He was in that small of a confined area. He was definitely going to come nose to nose with another dog. And
Right.
so that taking him into that situation, that was my responsibility to him, was
Right.
to be aware of what his limitations were and to make sure I wasn't pushing him past what he was able to do. That's what being a responsible pet owner is about. That's what
Right.
loving your pet is really about, right? Is being considerate of what they're capable of doing and not pushing them farther than they can go.
Yeah, definitely. And, and realizing that other people have a right to occupy that space as well. I think sometimes that, just because a place is pet friendly doesn't mean that everybody in that place wants to be jumped on by your dog or licked by your dog or slobbered on by your dog. I mean, you still have to respect other people's personal space and people's property as well.
Right. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah. What about for people who are not RV traveling? I know that some state parks and, at least in Texas, sometimes you can find places that have cabins and things like that. Is that fairly universal, or should people be looking at, VRBO or Airbnb, places like that? Are there
Yeah,
pros and
I
cons
think
to any of those?
absolutely. First of all, it all depends on where you're going to be most comfortable. So not everybody wants to go camping, and I totally get it. But also, if you have a dog that's very reactive to noise that they don't recognize, a hotel might not be the best option, right? Somebody's going to be running the ice maker. The elevator is going to be going up and down. Like that's something that you have to kind of think about. Now, you can maybe get a hotel where they've got more individual rooms, or you can maybe get a hotel that's not multiple floors, or, you can try to work around some of those things, but maybe an Airbnb or a VRBO, some sort of vacation rental, would work out better for a pet that's really sensitive to noise that they don't normally hear. Camping, I think, is a great idea when you're traveling with a pet, whether you are actually in a tent or in a camper, or if you're looking at a cabin. Many, many campgrounds now are doing what Texas has done and built camping cabins, they call them, and many of them are pet friendly. And it's a lovely way to have a lot of outdoor space, which you don't have typically in a hotel. Then you're going to be walking your pet on a sidewalk probably to and from places where they can sniff around. So a campground can be fantastic because usually every cabin has a picnic table and every cabin has a campfire pit, and like you've got space to spread out a little bit, which tends to be a little bit easier when you're traveling with pets, I think. So it just really comes down to preference. But yeah, I think that camping cabins are definitely a great way to go when you're traveling with pets.
What about visiting family? Do you hear or do you get people writing in with questions or complaints about, people traveling? Because I've got a 30-year-old daughter. She actually lives here and runs the animal rescue with me. So whatever pets she has live here anyway. But what about people traveling with pets to visit parents or other family members? Any guidelines that you would give for either party on either side of that issue to make that work better?
Absolutely. We get a lot of questions and comments about this typically around the holidays.
Yeah, there you go.
Because people, I think, assume that their pet is going to be able to act however they act at home in somebody else's home. And that's not a good assumption to make. So it's always best to remember that you're a guest, that your pet is a guest. First of all, make sure your pet's welcome, because if there's going to be tension, it's sometimes just better to get your own space where your pet is welcome, right? Because then there's not the tension going on the whole time that you're there, right? Like you have a place where you can go and have your own space and have your own rules and have your own. But when you're in somebody's else's house, you really have to respect what's okay for them. That's something that needs to be defined before you go. in my opinion. Like those are conversations that should be had before you go visit somebody. First of all, make sure that your pet is welcome. Second of all, find out if any areas of the house are off limits. They might not want your pet on the furniture. They might not want your pet in the bed.
Right.
They're going to want to make sure that you're picking up after your pet in the yard. These kinds of things should be talked about in advance so that everybody's on the same page. And then if you're not comfortable with the rules, then okay, I'm just going to get a hotel, or I'm just going to go get a vacation rental while I'm there, and everybody will be happy.
Right. Yeah. And I do see a lot of that tension and frustration because those conversations have not happened in advance. And so you've got adult children coming home with spouses and pets. And, I can think of one particular example where the resident cats are now traumatized and hiding upstairs under a bed somewhere because everybody's dogs are running rampant and nobody wants to be the bad guy and say anything. But I mean, my feeling is the resident pets' comfort should come first. Because, that they should be able to be comfortable in their own home and not traumatized and have to hide under a bed in their own home, and that, visiting adult children should respect that. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely right. My sister has cats, and when we would stay with her, the dogs stayed outside during the day so that the cats had the house. And then when it was time to go to, we stayed outside too. I mean, we didn't just leave them tied up outside. We were outside hanging out in the yard, out on the deck, whatever. But then, in the evening when it was time to come in, the dogs were on the first, the cats went, they did go upstairs, not to hide necessarily, but just to be away from all of the activity. And the dogs stayed on the first floor. And then when we went to our bedrooms, the dogs went into the bedroom with us. The door was shut. The cats had the rest of the house. They like to be active a lot at night. So having the dogs put away and in our bedroom with us with the door shut, that was how we handled it, because we didn't want my sister's cats to be traumatized either. And my dogs weren't used to cats, so they would have definitely, traumatized the cats.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said, having that conversation in advance, and I think not assuming that because somebody has pets that it's now can be a pet free-for-all, because not everybody's pets are going to be comfortable in those situations. So I think managing the space can go a long way towards keeping the peace and keeping everybody comfortable, for sure, even if it's not maybe the way that you're used to living at home. So that's some good advice. Any other tips, as far as traveling with other pets, or any other advice that you want to give to kind of wrap things up here today that we haven't hit on?
Yeah, I think it's just important for people to know that taking your pet on vacation doesn't mean you're going to sit in a room somewhere, a hotel room or a house someplace, and order takeout, and that's going to be the extent of your vacation, unless that's what you want, right? Most of us, when we go to a new place, we want to see what there is to see in that place. And I just want people to know that there's such a great variety of things that you can do with your pet when you're traveling. And we've got thousands of listings on the site for things to do in different areas, attractions and parks and trails and all kinds of things, like I was talking about before, scenic train rides and boat rentals and all kinds of things that you can do. And we've done a lot of that research for you. So you don't always have to use all of your own imagination coming up with these ideas. We traveled for 12 years and wrote blog posts about the things that we did with our dogs in more than 300 places in the US and Canada. So people can also just go to the site for inspiration if they are feeling like they want to take a trip, but they don't really know where they want to go. But maybe they have some ideas about, well, we'd like to see the mountains, or we want to see a pet-friendly beach. Those kinds of things, we've kind of done a lot of the research so that it's easier for people to find the information that they're looking for and then start to imagine the things that might be available to them when they get there.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you've basically, through sharing your experience on the website, have saved the rest of us probably hundreds and thousands of hours of research. And what I would highly recommend to people is, start doing that homework now. I started perusing the website, and there's so many blog posts with so much helpful information, and just become, even before you're planning a trip, become an educated person on travel with pets. And that way, when you're ready, we're recording this in early May. And so we've got the travel season coming up. When you're ready to go ahead and start planning that destination, you'll already have that knowledge on board. And then, you can go to your website and start really doing the nitty gritty homework about finding destinations and locations. Quick question. Can people actually book reservations through your website, or how does that work if I find some of those accommodations on your website?
So generally, no, you can't book through Go Pet Friendly. It's an information resource only. Also, the website is also completely free for everybody to use. I want to make that clear. There is no fee involved in using Go Pet Friendly. So all the blog posts are available. All of the information related to the lodgings and the services and the activities and the restaurants, all completely available for everybody to use for free. You can't book directly through Go Pet Friendly, but we have links on the site to send you to the booking site. So,
perfect.
So they would just be sent directly to whatever website it links to, and then they would make their reservations there.
And that's probably the best way to do it anyway, because that way, whatever information is the most current, because I would think that would be a bear to keep up with, trying to keep their policies and procedures current for these hundreds, thousands of places.
It is a lot of work trying to keep everything current. So we do always encourage everybody to double check the pet policies before they make their reservations anywhere, because they don't always notify us when they change their pet policies. So that's always important to just double check before you go ahead and make your reservations.
Okay, great. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much for starting the website, Go Pet Friendly. It's something that I would bet that at least a lot of our listeners may not realize exists, but it's a tremendous resource for anybody who wants to basically live their best life with their pets. And I think the point that you made early on is something that I want to leave everybody with, is that we are living with our pets for such a limited period of time. There's never been anybody that I've ever met who said, "Oh, I wish I had less time with my pet." Their lives are so much shorter than ours. Why would we want to leave them home for 2 weeks when we have the opportunity to take them with us and experience these wonderful things that we get to experience with them instead of without them? So thank you so much for being here today and for creating such an awesome resource for all of us.
It is absolutely my pleasure. That is what drives me. It's my passion to help people spend more time and have more quality time with their pets, build more memories together. So I appreciate you for having me and introducing me to your audience.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you again for listening to another episode of Starlight Pet Talk. If you know anybody with pets, definitely share our podcast information with them, and, make it a goal to plan a trip with your pet. Start small, like we said earlier today, and then you can build up to bigger and better things. And as we say every single week, if you don't do anything else this week, give your pet a hug from us.
You've been listening to the Starlight Pet Talk podcast. We're glad you joined us to gain new insight on the many loving ways to adopt and care for your pets. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. And if you want more information, go to starlightpettalk.com, because your pet can't talk. Be sure to join us next time for Starlight Pet Talk. You've been listening to the Starlight Pet Talk podcast. We're glad you joined us to gain new insight on the many loving ways to adopt and care for your pets. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. And if you want more information, go to starlightpettalk.com, because your pet can't talk. Be sure to join us next time for Starlight Pet Talk.